Hello there. So I'm calling this one dressing gown sessions. It's very strange, but I never bought myself dressing gowns, never wanted to wear them, and I've been bought a total of 3 by other people. So I thought today let's celebrate dressing gowns. And what I want to do is I want to talk to you about something very particular, which is what we all have in common. And that's the title of today's work, really. We all have in common certain things, and so that's what we're going to look at. And I'm going to do this by sharing about myself, which is something that I've done many times before. And I'm going to go into a somewhat different direction, perhaps, than I've done before. So I'm going to start off by just doing this waving the book in front of the camera thing. It's called A Manual for Heartache. That's what it's called there, A Manual for Heartache. And the details of the book will be in the description, as you would expect. So what we all have in common, shamanic, that's really the proper title of this one. And I apologise if it might take a little bit longer to get straight in there than what I normally do. And what I'm looking at is this commonality of experience we've all got. Only there's a conspiracy. The conspiracy is everyone out there doesn't have this thing, but you do. And so that gets shattered, because when you watch this film, you're going to hear me talking about me, and you're going to instantly recognise aspects of me in you. And then it's only a short jump from that to realise that this is the story for everyone. So the thing that we all have in common, and I'm going to start by talking about my Korean TV shows, which I'm pretty enamoured of these days. And the thing is, they are so real. That's what I like about them. And it's very strange, because some of the settings and the storylines seem like anything but there's always this sense of brutal realism, which is always there. And it's always just below the surface, or right on the surface, or totally in your face, depending on which show it happens to be. And what's been coming up a lot for me just recently is you're getting into knowing these characters, and then all of a sudden one reveals, well, actually, I was out with my mum one day. We were on the beach, we were in town, we were in the shopping centre, we were here, we were there, we were everywhere. We were in the park, we were in the playground, we were in nature, wherever it was. And mum said, hang on there, I'm just going to go get us something to eat, stroke drink, stroke whatever. The mother then walks off, and then that's the last time the child ever sees the mother. Now, when I was watching my historical shows, this was really totally not surprising, because life in those days was very cheap. People died very easily. But this is not. This is like modern time stuff, where there's not these things happening to these parents. They're actually choosing to walk out of their child's lives, apparently just like that. And of course you go underneath it all and you realise the extraordinary amount of pain that parent is carrying, that would cause them to make such a disastrous choice for the child and ultimately for them, because when you hurt someone, you're hurting yourself. So what a horrific experience. So that's enough beating around the bush, and I want to talk about myself, because that's really what I'm here to do. I had an experience just a couple of days ago where I started speaking to someone who I'm getting to know, and I ended up sharing rather more than I was expecting. And I ended up speaking about my experiences of what people call black magic, which is really where someone deliberately goes out to violate the free will of another. And they don't do it through physical violence or physical restraint or informing on them and getting them thrown in prison, nothing like that. No, they actually use magical means to harm and hurt that person. And I talked about a bunch of other things too. And then I've been going through this thing with my mother that whereby it's reached the point that her life has had another really sharp, severe turn. So it's gone from her having moderate Alzheimer's in the home and me taking her out every time I visit and me giving her experiences which, even though she doesn't remember them, though she really values them at the time she's having them and always says so, and it's become simpler and simpler and simpler. And it's these days it's just taking her out, maybe just travelling a few miles in the car because there's nowhere to go where the home is, and then we go and somewhere to eat or looking around the shops. It's really that basic, but gives her enormous pleasure. And I've been fine with that, been good with that. But then while I was away and I came back the day I came back, she's had this broken wrist and head injury, and she's got bleeding on the brain from the most recent fall just a couple of days ago, and also a more ancient fall or falls last year. And when I saw her, I was just so shocked, and she's aware of my existence, and I can tell that by the sudden sort of movement that takes place in her body. And she's lost even more weight. She's not eating now, and she's got this bruising, and her wrist just looks like this nightmare done up with little bits of scraps of stuff. But that's probably because she's been ripping at the bandages, I don't know. But it's gone from, okay, this is a horror story I can cope with, to this is a horror story I can't cope with at all. And I read the hospital's notes, and it's like they don't recognise moderate Alzheimer's, they recognise severe dementia. So it's like, whoa, okay, so all this has happened. I've only been away a couple of weeks, but that's a big one. And I shared a little bit about this on my most recent film, and I actually went around Nanny Castle straight after visiting my mum and shared a little bit about that. And I've had a couple of days to process, and I'm waking up and lying in bed, and I'm on my own, which gives me more freedom to really process and digest. And it's like, have I got stuff to share with you guys? I so have. And so then this book, can't remember the title of it, let's have a look at it again. It's called A Manual for Heartache, and I read just the first chapter about this woman's experience, bang, and then the second chapter is about, what about your story, bang. So that's what's going on for me. And I could tell you, I mean, this is what makes me different from a lot of people is that when it comes to wounds, I've got so many to choose from, but then everyone's got loads to choose from, actually. That's also true. But being a shamanic practitioner, my life has been to come and experience degrees of trauma which are above and beyond what a lot experience, but nothing like as much as other experience. I'm just Mr. Average, really, like everyone is really when it comes to these things. Yeah, so it's hard to talk about. And that's what this film's all about. It's about how hard it is to talk about these really personal things that happen to us and how distressing they are, and to share the distress and to acknowledge that the conspiracy out there is everyone's okay, and the reality is no one's okay. Everyone's carrying a wound, and it's the wound we carry that makes us so distinctive, so amazing, so who we are, so fascinating, so why you want to bother to watch this film, or why I want to hear from you. I want to hear your experiences. So here I am. I'm going back now to an experience that I had. I set up a retreat for a bunch of people. No one turned up. Fantastic gift. Didn't feel like it at the time. Medicine all there. Right, well, I won't even bother to go to the venue to do the retreat. I'll just stay at home, and I did. 10:30 in the morning. Right, I'm going to go for it. So it's a similar time of the day, and I'm going to go for it, but in a completely different way. So this is one of the two key components which makes up the plant medicine people call ayahuasca. Only the thing is, at these two components, there's one that contains the active ingredient called dimethyltryptamine, DMT. That's what actually gives the person the experience. And then there's the other one, which is the monoamine oxidase inhibitor, which simply takes away the enzyme which is preventing us from having these plant experiences all the time, and it enables us to have like a window of so many hours when, if you take some DMT, it's going to have an effect. Whereas if you take DMT in the plant medicine in the drinking sense, it's not going to work like that. If you have it in the smoking sense, then that is so strong it actually cuts through the enzyme very, very briefly for 8 minutes. But the 5-hour experience we're talking about with the plant medicines, that's not going to work unless you have something like this. This is the what I call the P.harmala. There is also the chancruna, serves the same function. There are other plants too that serve the same function. So this is the one that people are not interested in. This is the one that's actually completely legal, and even in the UK with the Psychoactive Plants Act, this is completely legal, and you can walk into a ethnic grocers and buy it in amongst the herbs and spices. It is that straightforward and common a plant, and it's been used by the Gnostics for many, many hundreds of years to actually prepare for Gnostic experiences. So I've got what I call half a full dose here, 25 milliliters, and I'm going to be working with this plant today. And I'm not quite ready to do that. I have fasted, so I'm really well ahead on that one. I'm going to drink some more water first though. In fact, this glass will have to be empty before the little beaker is touched for imbibing purposes. So for me, plants are the closest experience I have to God, because although we are of course all God, and so are all animals, every living being is an emanation of divine source. Just personally for me, I feel the essence of the Godhead in the plants more obviously and strongly than any other form, and that is so lovely. So a little bit of a reveal here. Now, one of the issues that I have because of what I went through as a child is those very brutalizing experiences which literally ripped me apart in many ways actually means I don't have a sense of boundaries as other people have, and this sometimes gets me into trouble. So I'm quite happy to get into trouble today, right here, right now, because as some of you will know, my sister, she was the third death that I experienced. There was first of all my wife, then there was my father, then there was my sister. So she passed in 2012. And the official story is she was taking patties out of the oven and she collapsed. And apparently she has some phlegm lodged in her throat. The ambulance was called. And she died either in the hospital or in the ambulance on the way to the hospital. My memory of this precise detail is not completely clear anymore. However, what is much more clear to me is that she had experiences when she was a teen whereby she was chosen and she allowed herself to be used for black magic purposes, which very much included the negative aspects of sex magic. And this is where magic is used to harm others. So that's what she found herself experiencing on the age of 16. Complete surprise. And cause of death, supposedly some phlegm lodged in the back of her throat, had a history of asthma. None of this really means jack shit in terms of someone dying. She was a strong person, particularly at that point in her life, physically strong, having an amazing job working as a miracle worker, where she went into homes of the incredibly rich and wealthy in their 90s mostly, sometimes in their 80s, at the end of life, and she was there as their companion. And the ignorant company that employed her simply to be that. This person is not having much human companionship. Maybe they're on their own, maybe they've got a partner, but that's all of the age they don't go out anymore, hardly ever. So it's a companion, someone to enliven their days. Well, my sister, because of what she went through, her own experiences with the black magic, misuse of magic being done to her, she also didn't have any conventional sense of boundaries either. So she realized, this is a crock of shit, I'm here. And she was there because our dad died, and that had such a profound effect on her existence that it totally derailed what she was doing. It's like, right, this is it. My life's purpose now is to work with people dying. That is my mission. And so watching my father die in the hospital, she wasn't there for the actual flatlining bit just as well. It was appropriate she went out with my mother for a cup of tea in the hospital cafe at that point. But here's the point. And you can tell I'm really struggling with this one, aren't I? Yes, I am, and that's also a good sign. So, there was no proper cause of death. However, the cause of death is black magic. That's how she died. She died because more than one human being were working actively against her, because she was very, very much hated by one person. Let's put it that way. And that hatred was used to fuel a joining of a black magical group, and she was targeted, and that's really the cause of death. Magical interference, to be blunt. So that's a wound. That's a wound that I carry, and I've never spoken about that openly. So that's a new one. Yeah, a couple of days ago I spoke about this in passing to one person. Now I'm sharing. So when magic is misused, wow, yeah, can literally cause such things to happen. And that was a very distressing experience, obviously very wounding. And when I got the phone call from my sister who's alive, that she had mysteriously and unexpectedly died at the, in my opinion, extremely young age of 49, it's like, yeah, it wasn't until this year I was able to face up to that cause of death. So we all have these wounds, don't we? And that's another one of mine, apart from what happened to me as the child, which has been spoken out before on many occasions, and also about the passing of my wife with cancer, which has been spoken about a lot. So something I learned through sexual abuse and through working with people and listening to people, mostly listening to people. I have an extraordinary experience of having listened to so many people who've been sexually abused, because they instantly recognise that although from the conventional person's point of view I didn't have any boundaries, from their point of view I was super safe, because I was a man and I was actually on the receiving end of this. So women came in their droves since about 1993 to share their experiences with me. And so I know the power of hearing the story, which is what you're doing now. You're having the power of hearing the story. It's a very great power. And the power the person gets from revealing the story. And so there are so many ones I could focus in on. And I was reminded by the book, and they're reminding of my experience of working with a whole bunch of women who've been sexually abused. Sometimes it's the ones that have had the least horror that are most severely traumatized. And I mentioned it in my book, Sex Magic, the woman that experienced so much abuse that I can't tell you anything about it. And I was in a private group working with that because you'd just be too upset to hear about it. And then there was a woman I had a relationship with for 1 lunar month. Also can't tell you about that, far too distressing for you to cope with, most likely. But I'll talk about this one, which is, she was a young child, about sometime between the age of 2 and 3, and she was walking in the park, and a man exposed himself to her, and revealing his genitals. He was at a distance. That's all, nothing else. That's all that ever happened to her. That was such a severe trauma that when I knew her in her late 20s, early 30s, she'd never been able to have any kind of a relationship, romantic, intimate. Not a possibility, because it had been so shocking, so traumatic. So that's it thing. So we're dispelling the myth that the severity of the trauma is what matters. Irrelevant. What matters only is the impact of that event on you. Bang right into ayahuasca. If you look at my films, I've got a number of films about ayahuasca, and one of the particular films, right at the end, there's a bit where I actually film that instant I talked about earlier. Remember I talked about that instant where I hosted this retreat, no one turned up. I had this experience on my own. I had 1.5 doses in total, which is actually the largest amount I ever had, because I always need minuscule amounts. That was like super huge for me. And the key information I was given from that journey was when I'd actually stopped my intimate experience with a toilet bowl, and I was now sitting on the bed and the camera was set up, and I was saying, this is me having an experience. And that is the most profound truth I've ever heard uttered by any life form in this lifetime, because that is a statement which is always true, uttered by a plant to me, the plant ayahuasca. Very simple. This is you having an experience. This is me having an experience. This is you having an experience. So I'm going to share about one particular experience after the break, and that's about a relationship that I had, and about the fact that relationship ended and how that's affected me. So thank you very much for tuning in, and after the short break we will go deeper.